What's going on, everybody? It's AG here. Another college football week has passed, so today I'm bringing my Week 6 college football top 25 rankings. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so as you can see on the screen now, here's my top 25 for the week. We had a ton of movement this week. I had 6 teams dropping out of my top 25 from last week. That includes Minnesota, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Washington, Pitt, and Oklahoma. I've been telling you all year, I don't believe Oklahoma. I didn't buy the hype on Venables or Oklahoma. They lost way too much this past year, and they lost their head coach. I needed to see a little more to believe Venables. And Oklahoma, with what they lost, with Lincoln Riley leaving and Caleb Williams leaving to USC, they lost a ton. And nothing against Oklahoma, but I've been saying this all year. I wasn't buying the hype. So, now on to my top 25. So, number 25, making their first appearance, we've got Syracuse. The Orangemen, they just keep on winning this year. They're undefeated so far, coming in at 5-0. I'll be curious to see how they do once they actually start playing some tougher ACC competition. At number 24, I've got Kansas State. They're coming off a win over Texas Tech, and they beat Oklahoma last week. AJ Martinez and Deuce Vaughn make a formidable duo. This team could challenge for the Big 12 championship. At number 23, making their first appearance in my top 25, we've got another Big 12 team, the Kansas Jayhawks. They're coming off a win over Iowa State, 14-11. Wasn't their typical game. Usually they just outscore their opponent, but it's good to know that their defense can step up when they need them to step up. Kansas, I'll be curious to see how they play once they get further into the Big 12. At 22, I've got another Big 12 team. The only 2-loss team in my top 25, Baylor. They're coming off a loss to Oklahoma State, but their only 2 losses are to Oklahoma State and BYU, which are both in my top 25, so I couldn't really knock them too much. So at number 22, I've got Baylor. At number 21, an SEC team coming off a win over Texas A&M, I've got Mississippi State. Mike Leach and company, their only loss this year is to LSU, which I have ranked ahead of them. They've been pretty good so far this year. Speaking of those LSU Tigers, at number 20, I've got LSU. They're coming off a tough win over Auburn. Brian Kelly and company, their only loss this year is a hit-and-miss game against Florida State, and which really could have gone either way. If you remember that last 30 seconds, that 99-yard drive, it could have gone either way. They've got Tennessee this week in what should be a pretty intriguing game. At number 19, LSU's only loss, I've got Florida State. They're coming off a loss to Wake Forest, which I'm pretty high on, so actually they moved up for me this week. I've got NC State this week in what should separate some of that division in the ACC. At number 18, I've got BYU. Another week that I'm less impressed with BYU. I was high on this team at first, but the more games they play, the more they just scare me. I'm not sure if I can trust this team at all. At number 17, making their first appearance in my top 25, I've got UCLA. They're coming off a big win over Washington. They're undefeated. They play Utah this week, in which will show what they're really made of. At number 16, I've got NC State. They're coming off a close loss to Clemson. The score was close, but the game just didn't feel close. The more this game went on, the more the score stayed the same, but it just didn't seem like NC State had any chance. Because it's like all they need is one play, but how are they going to get that one play? Their offense had no explosion. They had no chance of getting a big play. At number 15, I've got Oregon. Oregon, I don't know how to read on them. They had that first Week 1 absolute blowout to Georgia where they just got slaughtered. But ever since that, they've looked pretty good. I think it's the Bo Nix factor. He's kind of hit and miss. If they keep winning, though, their only losses to Georgia, they're really not a bad team. At number 14, making their first appearance in my top 25, I've got the TCU Horned Frogs. The Big 12 TCU team, they beat the crap out of Oklahoma this week. This was never a question. By the end of the first quarter, this game was done. I'm going to need some more data to make sure, but I think TCU is a pretty good team. They've beaten SMU, which almost beat Maryland, which almost beat Michigan. I don't know how that'll play out by the end of the year, but if you look at it that way, TCU could be a top 10 team. Because like I said, they beat SMU, which almost beat Maryland, which almost beat Michigan. I don't know how that exactly equates, because every team won, but TCU could be legit. At number 13, dropping out of the top 10, I've got Kentucky. They're coming off a loss to Ole Miss, in which they honestly should have won the game. They look like the better team. They had the best player on the field. They should have won this game. Kentucky, even though they lost this game, they still have their own control. If they can just win out, they'll be alright. At number 12, jumping way up for me, I've got Wake Forest. They're coming off a win over Florida State, but really what impressed me is Clemson's win. This only reaffirmed what I didn't know: Wake Forest can play. I was kind of skeptical on Wake Forest. I wasn't sure. But that overtime loss to Clemson really showed they can play to me. And then they kind of handled Florida State today. So I think Wake Forest is legit. Number 11, I've got Penn State. Another week where the Nittany Lion just barely scrape by, barely win, but they win. A win's a win. They kind of struggled with Northwestern, and Northwestern's not very good. So I was a little skeptical on this one. If they would have won a little bigger, I probably would have moved up in my top 10 this week. But at number 11, I've got Penn State. Alright, so kicking off the top 10, at number 10, I've got Ole Miss. They're moving up for me after a win over Kentucky. It was a tough win for them, but they beat a top 10 team, so that's always a big win. At number 10, I've got Ole Miss. At number 9, a team I'm very high on, I've got the Utah Utes. Their only loss this year is to a Florida team in the swamp. I know it's a loss, but they should have won that game. This week, they beat the crap out of Oregon State, which USC barely scraped by last week. They shouldn't have beat them, so Utah, I think, is the team to beat in the Pac-12. At number 8, they had a bye this week. I've got the Tennessee Volunteers. I'm not entirely sure how to feel on this team. They play LSU this week, in which I honestly think they might lose this game, but Tennessee, I've got at number 8. At number 7, I've got the USC Trojans. They keep on winning, but I'm really waiting on them to play a good team. After that, I think I'll be able to tell a little bit from them. They play Washington State this week, in which is a game I think they could lose, I'll be honest. Number 6, I've got the Michigan Wolverines. They struggled a little bit this week against Iowa, so they bumped down a couple spots for me. Nothing against them. They keep on winning, so if they keep on winning, they've got their opportunities in front of them. All they got to do is win out, and they'll be all right. Just coming in at number 5, making a big jump for me this week, I've got the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They're coming off a big win over Baylor, in which really the score was closer than the game was. It was really never in doubt. Oklahoma State, they look good this year. All they got to do is run the table, then they're going to be there in the playoff. At number 4, I've got Clemson. They looked really good this week against NC State. Even though the score was semi-close, they dominated NC State. This game was never in doubt. Clemson looks legit to me. At number 3, probably the biggest news of the week, dropping down for me. At number 3, I've got the Georgia Bulldogs. They struggled against Missouri. If they struggle against these bad teams, one of these bad teams is eventually going to come back and bite them. They can't struggle with these bad teams. They got to be able to put them away. Georgia worries me, so I've got them down at number 3 this week. At number 2, I've got the Ohio State Buckeyes. Another week where Ohio State looks absolutely dominant. The more games they play, the better they look. They're doing all this without their best receiver, maybe the best receiver in the country, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So once he gets back, this offense may be unstoppable. And at number 1, you already know, the Alabama Crimson Tide. They beat Arkansas pretty handily this week. It kind of got questionable there at the end of the third quarter, but that was just a quarter where everything was going right for Arkansas. Alabama did all this with Bryce Young out. If Bryce Young is out, though, that's going to impact this team. I'll be curious to see how long he's going to be out. The backup quarterback played good, but when they play tougher competition, I don't know. It may be tough. So, at number 1, I've got Alabama. So, that's my top 25. Drop any teams that you think should be in the rankings down in the comments below, and drop any teams that you think should not be in the rankings down in the comments below as well. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That way when I post more college football related content, you'll be the first one to know about it. So until next time, AG, out.